Welcome back, everybody. We had like a week off here. Kolton and I are back, and today we were going to do something a little more fun. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I was thinking, it's a highly controversial topic, but I think it's one worth talking about, which is the sort of, if you're starting a cycle, what is an adequate beginner dose, especially if you are, looking to be a competitive bodybuilder at really any level. What is an actual dose that's going to get you to progress at a level that would be acceptable to be competitive within the next year or two, right? And I think everyone has wildly different opinions. Back in the day on Reddit forums, it was 500 milligrams per week was sort of the set dose of testosterone. You should never use more than one anabolic in your first cycle. You should never use growth hormone. You should never use any other compound outside of just using testosterone. And I think there's, we kind of see through the blanket or understand what people are doing these days in different circuits and can kind of speak to this in a different from a different viewpoint in actually what's really happening outside of forums and on stage.
Yeah. So to back up for a second to really define what TRT is, because I think this also gets really confusing nowadays. So TRT is testosterone replacement therapy. So TRT technically means you're just replacing testosterone, right, that you're deficient in. It is not supposed to be leveraged for some sort of anabolic tool, right? It really, in theory, outside of the fact that you're not going to get a diurnal dip and peak, there's really no health, there's no performance benefit there. There's health benefits. And it really is supposed to be, technically, at least in the United States, it's defined as 250 milligrams a week or under. And that's why testosterone is generally manufactured by a pharmaceutical company in 250 milliliters, milligrams per ml by cc, because they're regulating, because doctors will generally give you a 1 cc syringe. So they don't want you basically to abuse it. And they want the dosing to be really simple. They don't want you to measure. They just want you to take your dose. Over time, a lot of doctors have realized that maybe that's too much. So they don't give people the 250, right? Or the 200, depending on what testosterone you're using. So they reduce it, right? I see anywhere from, by smart doctors, anywhere with 140, 150, 160, somewhere in that range sometimes, right? And up to like 2. You generally don't see the 250 so much anymore. There's nothing wrong with it. You just don't see it as often anymore. I think, in my opinion, anything under 140 is probably insignificant and probably doing potentially more harm than good. Like if you're really just shutting yourself fully down after 3 months, after 3 months of use, you're basically fully suppressed at a dose of around 200 milligrams. If you're going to shut yourself down to get less than you had before, it seems really silly to me. Testosterone replacement therapy is also not involving primobolan. It's not an FDA-approved drug. That's not part of, because there's no essential methanolone in the human body. It doesn't include masteron. It doesn't include anavar. It doesn't include nandrolone. I know a lot of clinics want to prescribe now all these other anabolics to add on to TRT. Technically, that's still not TRT. I think not. Again, I have no problem with anavar and nandrolone, but that's not technically TRT. Those drugs were originally used for burn victims and anemia and wasting syndromes, not so much for hormone replacement therapy. There is a benefit to them, but that again is not. I think this is where the water gets right muddied. Right on the internet, people define TRT now as like this TRT plus thing, and the doctors are kind of following suit with this, and it gets very murky as to what you see people using. But with a cycle, where would you say? So what age would you say this would be a wise move to jump into?
Yeah,
for a cycle, not TRT. Not TRT. I mean, for
an actual cycle.
Yes.
Just speaking in terms of growth and development and when might be most applicable to leverage pharmaceuticals that are going to enhance growth, I honestly say with a certain cap, like the younger the better, right? Like, so I'm not talking about fucking 14 or 15 years old, but 17, 18, like I could see there being a reason if someone was entirely bought in on developing a physique that is fucking wild. The earlier the better, just because the time that you have under higher doses is the area under curve is greater. And then you're also much more tolerant to doses of androgens at that age because you're already likely going to have higher degree of androgens. You're more robust as a human being and you can train your ass off and you can eat your ass off. And it's a pretty easy phase to grow. Most bodybuilders, if you kind of look into their lore, they started around, and they're willing to admit it, they started around 17, 18, 19 years old. I think a lot of bodybuilders did actually. So
Yeah. The only caveat I would say to that age thing is, and not an age specific thing. I just think it's very important for you to learn how to eat and how to train
Yeah.
before you
Yeah.
dive into this, and have some natural training experience, because if
Mhm.
you have no idea how to even train at all without drugs, adding drugs to the scene is not going to necessarily benefit you in the long run, because as soon as you no longer have those, or you're not able to do them anymore, you're going to not have a clue what to do. And we don't need to get into it, but there probably is a limited amount of cycles that any one of us can run in our life, right? And we don't know what that is. It could be your first cycle and could cause serious side effects. It could be your 50th cycle, right? But we all have some sort of cap where your body will just no longer tolerate drugs anymore to a certain degree, depending on what you do. TRT, again, totally different story. So I just think young guys, while you're probably correct, if you're going to make it to the Olympia stage, you probably have to start when you're younger. And it's going to take you about 10 years, right? This is the other thing people don't seem to get. The time between starting, most guys make it to, pro stage probably after 10 years of cycling and training, right? You generally don't see it much faster than that. If you look at even like Nick Walker, these guys have been around for a long time. You just don't realize it. Yeah.
There's that kid who won his classic physique pro card at 19.
Yeah.
And he's a good example. He probably started when he was 16, real. Won his pro card when he was 19 and has an amazing physique, but obviously a genetic outlier. Regardless, his career, I mean, you can imagine his career is just fucking starting, and he has 10 years until he even needs to look at retirement. And yet, Chris Bumstead got his pro card when he was mid-20s. And so this kid has 5 more years on that. And it's just the longevity of your career, when you look at it that way, is a lot more. As long as you practice intelligent stack design, obviously dietary intake and training, I mean, it's just the outlook for your career looks a whole lot better if you can get. It's like investing, right? If I can invest $10 a day starting at 15 years old, the outcome when I'm 30 years old is going to be a lot better. And the same might be true for muscle mass. And that's obviously, there's some stratification you can make from those two things, but kind of the same concept applies of investing over time.
Yep. And I've said this before in other videos, and I'll say it again so people understand what really separates the pros from the people who couldn't become pros. There are plenty of people that could become pros that choose not to, and possibly vice versa, is basically your response to food, training, and drugs. Whether people want to believe that or not, it's a genetic thing. So those guys have different genes. They synthesize protein at a faster rate than most people, and they respond better to training, right? That's what you can see. These guys, they really can bang their bodies up pretty bad, where most humans just couldn't do that. Drugs or no drugs. And so a beginner, so like, what would you say a beginner? So like you said, this whole thing used to be, it was like 500 milligrams a test, right? Test only. And then maybe your second cycle was like with like an oral kicker.
I mean, so I think starting with testosterone, but not finishing with it for your first cycle is important, just to assess your, like you said, it's kind of like you need to assess your response to a particular dose. I do have guys who can do 600, 800 milligrams and respond like someone who is on a couple grams, and it just happens to be a thing. But I think for most people, the spitting average is probably going to be, you're going to need higher doses to get the results that you're seeing other people get, who might not be telling the truth. But in reality, what a person should start with is around that 250 to 300 milligram range. See how you respond for the first couple of weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Are you aromatizing too much? Are you, whatever. Do blood work, ideally. Then, if you're, for me, like I'm a non-aromatizer, I can run up to a gram of testosterone with 0 issues. So if you're like me and you test the waters, you keep titrating that testosterone dose up until you feel like, okay, I am aromatizing too much. And that's where you can complement the cycle with a secondary anabolic. And as you said before, and I've said as well, AIs aren't the devil. They are effective. They work as long as estrogen is within range and it's not too high or too low. You're cold and you're good to go. So if you need to use an AI, you can use an AI. But essentially, it's start at 200-ish milligrams, somewhere within that range, and then over the period of 3 to 4 months, titrate that dose up, add a secondary and complementary anabolic, and then start to, in my opinion, use growth hormone as early as possible, compared to the narrative, which is wait for whatever reason, right? Due to some sort of genomic effect. I think you should start earlier. And then, run that for legit a year, 2 years, as long as you're not exceeding a gram or 600 milligrams right off the gate, you can run that dose for a very long time without any detrimental health effects, as long as you're maintaining a good lifestyle, good diet, good training, monitoring your labs. You should be fine.
Yeah. So to back up for a second, when you said AIs or Arimidex, things like that. So
yeah,
and not to beat it, because I feel like I say this in every video. Yeah, they're definitely not the devil, but Arimidex can be used as part of TRT. See, that's still included in hormone replacement therapy with the goal of controlling estrogen. Now, again, we're not squashing our estrogen and we're not running our estrogen high. There's a reason why there's a range. Some hormones, the range, like thyroid stuff, sometimes is not necessarily accurate to the range. What we need to see is ideally TSH is a good example of that. But with estrogen, there is really no benefit to be running it high or low. It's not. If everyone's reason here is that it's anabolic or insulin growth factor 1, it is called insulin growth factor 1. It is a peptide hormone. It is related to insulin and stimulated by amino acids and insulin, glucose, not by estrogen. Otherwise, it would be called estrogen growth factor 1. So that is not a reason to run your estrogen high. There's a reason why women have less muscle than men and why they have less IGF available to their muscles. That's because of estrogen. So we'll keep it really simple there. Just keep your estrogen in range. With the cycle, yeah, I would say the same thing. 300 milligrams. It's been proven over and over and over again that 300 milligrams is like the supra physiological level, right? That's where really the beginning of more than the human body could ever produce. And that's kind of where the dose, and then it's not linear, but it's on a pretty steep curve up after 300 milligrams, right? Like 600 yielded 50% more muscle gains in most people and, twice the fat loss as 300, and then it pretty much continues up to about a gram, and then it flattens a little bit, right? And then depending on the person, it probably continues up possibly up to 2 grams, but it generally starts to flatten out at about a gram for most people. And that's, again, I would do the same as you. I think at that point, it's probably, if you're running a gamma test and you've no longer experiencing results from that gamma test, then it's time to look at adding something else. In my mind, I think a lot of guys don't ever experience testosterone on its own. I mean, we're really not, scientists have not really been able to create a better drug than testosterone. There's a reason why the human body kind of runs on that as an anabolic. Same with growth hormone. Those really are two the best and safest hormones. You can get a ton out of those two alone without adding other man-made chemicals. Like, people love to talk about primobolan. Now, primobolan is considered a relatively safe compound. It's used in children, and it has 50, 60 years of safety data in humans. At the end of the day, like, it doesn't replace testosterone. It can't be run alone in men. So it's not necessarily going to be as good as testosterone. But yeah, I think of guys today, what's interesting is you see a lot of guys just, right, they dabble a little bit, test, and they're immediately adding something to it. Which, again, it's not wrong, but it's just an interesting strategy.
Yeah. I mean, I usually like to split test, right? So it's test one thing, then test another thing. So it'd be like start with testosterone, 5 to 6 weeks later, add another anabolic. And I usually see that, I don't know what you see, but it's about 100 milligram titration is what garners an effect. So, let's say we started at 300 milligrams. Within 6 weeks, we'll know if we need to increase by 100 milligrams and then increase by 100 milligrams. And that's why I say, like, people hear like a year to 2 year cycle and they're like, oh my fucking God, no way. But it's like, you have to realize you're starting at 300 milligrams. And we even have clinical research to support that there's fucking like hardly any health detriments from running 300 milligrams, even let alone 600 milligrams. Is very
little. It's lowered HDL.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, might even be irrelevant right now. So we, can say confidently that that's pretty much, negligible at best. It's innocuous. So you titrate 100 milligrams, 100 milligrams, 100 milligrams every 6 to 8 weeks. It's like you could run for a year and a half and you just get out to 800 milligrams when you're like, okay, like, I think I'm going to take a break. And that might not even be the case. And then even then you still have the titration of peptides like growth hormone, and you still have the titration of other compounds, ancillaries and the like, that you could leverage for more performance enhancements, right? So there's so much in there that you can unpack, but I don't think, saying that you don't need to run more than 300 or even 500 milligrams for your first cycle. I think that's so valuable, because at the end of the day, you need to use what you need to use to get the result that you need to get. So if that is, like, for example, a great analogy to this is, if I want to make $1 million, and I need to work more hours to get the $1 million, and I need to do more physically, I can't just sit here and say, well, I'm not going to. I'm just going to wait doing what I'm currently doing to get the $1 million. It might work, and I might slowly garner that income over the next 20 years. But if I want to do it in 5, I'm going to need to work my ass off.
Yep.
And the same is true in this concept, where it's, if I want to build a copious amount of muscle to be competitive at a bodybuilding like level, not just, you know, in the gym scene, just chilling out, flex your muscles in the mirror, but on a stage, I'm going to need to do more to get more. And at a certain point, if you're looking to compete within the next several years, you need to realize that increasing the dose is not a bad thing. I've had a lot of calls with people lately who are very conservative, which is great out the gate, but they also get so conservative to a fault where they're scared about their security. And again, it's talking about being intelligent with stack design, doing lab work, being critical, but you still need to increase the dose to get an effect, titrate for effect. And until you have that effect and you're getting desirable rates of growth, you know, you still need to increase the dose.
Yeah. Well, like we talked about previously with myostatin and the inhibitors, right? So whether it's myostatin or some unknown inhibitor, some other process the human body's going to, you know, put to auto-regulate growth because it doesn't want to keep growing. I mean, the way to get around that, right? We talked about this in the other video, but I'll reiterate that there's 3 really ways to get around it. You have to increase food, you increase drugs, or you have to basically reduce the load and reset everything. And when I reset, I don't mean the androgen receptors. I mean reset the myostatin levels. But yeah, I mean, that's the natural progression, right? The big, regardless of what people want to believe, the big guys like Nick Walker don't ever come off, right? They might cruise and then blast, but their cruise is, especially as they get bigger, their cruise is much more extreme than you would think their cruise is. You know, from the pros that I see, most of the cruises are probably still over 1 gram. I don't think most of these guys go much lower than that because they're just going to lose size. And honestly, I mean, you become homeostatic at whatever you're running. It just doesn't feel good to go lower.
Right. Yeah, I think people would be shocked, honestly. And I always, you know, preface this with, we're so fortunate we get to be in this industry at the level we are and talk to the people we do and have people messaging us for advice and stuff. And we get to learn about what people are doing. And it's, I mean, yeah, like for cruises, in a guy who's over, you know, 270, 280, it's 750 milligrams, like higher, you know, at best. It's, yeah, I mean, it's, people would be shocked. So it again, I think a lot of the times people forget this is an extreme sport and they think they can make conditions. Like, my condition is I don't want to run over this dose. And my condition is that I don't want to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, sometimes you have to make that consolidation and expect to break some of your conditions. As long as you're healthy, you know, it's going to have to happen.
And with that, and you and I talked about this offline a couple of days ago, what I found, so previously I've stated like what I thought the order of importance were for like a natural lifter versus an enhanced lifter. And I had said for an enhanced lifter, you know, genetics is number 1, which is going to be number 1 for a natural lifter too. Yeah, I think I put food as number 2. I think I put drugs as number 3, and I put training as the bottom. I know people don't want to believe that. I think once you're enhanced and you're at a status where you have some good level of experience, what you do in the gym, as long as you're pushing yourself, I think it's overrated. I think we should all push ourselves. I'm not saying that. I think going to is important. I don't think the training, the specifics matter so much. I think guys obsess about that. If it really was so exact, then we'd all do the same thing, and we all do very different things.
I agree so much.
And people hate to say that because that's like the one controllable. You can't control your genes, but you control your training. And unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do there. I would say the one thing that I'm going to add now, after being exposed to more high level guys, is I'm going to put genetics as 1 still. I'm going to put risk tolerance as number 2. I'm going to put food as 3. I'm going to put drugs as 4. And I'll be honest with you, I had made videos in the past and even recently stating what pro cycles look like. And I'm going to say that those are more like pro level cruises. pro level cycle is closer to 5 to 6 grams of gear now. I was misguided in my beliefs. So yeah, I mean, typically you were seeing much bigger with the big guys. I'm not necessarily talking about, a guy in physique. I'm talking about a men's open bodybuilder. If guys are striving to be a 300-pound guy on stage, that's upwards of 2 grams of test, upwards of 2 grams of an anabolic. It's generally a bottle of each a week, perhaps a third anabolic in there. It's also orals. And again, I'd said in the past that guys weren't using Anadrol. No, guys are using Anadrol, and they're using lots of it. I'm seeing standard doses of 300 milligrams a day, Anadrol 50.
Yeah.
So I don't think anything's really changed since the 90s or early 2000s. I think it's the same. I think guys just got more quiet about it. I think they've come clean to admit they're using drugs, but then they're just saying silly stuff like test and primo. I don't see primo in any cycle, to be honest with you. And again, I hate to say that because I had said that publicly previously. I don't see primo in anyone's cycle at that level.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking before this, and at a certain point, orals become a medium to use to get more milligrams of anabolics because you're running out of injection sites, and that's the real problems you're running into at the high level bodybuilding level, like top 15 kind of level, competing in real shows, right? Not just your regional level shit, but I think a lot of people won't even get to that point in their career, or they might, but yeah, I mean, that's the real shit. Like, that's the stuff no one wants to talk about. It's like, Mo Shaban just got into the hospital for supposedly an infection and initial stages of organ failure. And it's like, he was going to a guest posing and stuff, and he could be telling the truth, but what's really going on there? Who knows? Like, people, it's an extreme sport, leaving it with that. It's like, the MMA, fighting in the UFC. It's a great example because for a long time, people wanted to exclude the use of elbows because using elbows was seen as this really fucking dangerous thing, but it works really fucking well. And it's dangerous and people fucking die, but it's a great way to see a fight. I mean, when a guy gets struck with an elbow, dude breaks his jaw, breaks his nose, his nose gets crushed in, especially back when the UFC was uncensored as fuck and you can do whatever you want to a person. I mean, it works so well that you're just like, well, fuck, dude, it's it's what it is, take it as it comes. And it's an extreme sport. People die, and it's the same thing here. It's like, yeah, there's certain things you got to admit happen, and they're going to happen whether you like it or not. And there's, of course, genetic outliers who can use very minimal and don't need to push the boundaries, but there's also others that seemingly push boundaries and have to keep doing it their entire career.
I do work with more than one pro that doesn't act like that either, that will use minimal stuff and has not used other exotic things so that's not across the board. I'm just saying I see all levels of it, and I put a meme up. I'm not going to use anyone's name. I put a reel up on Instagram a while ago that's had a ton of traction. That gentleman is telling the truth. He doesn't need a lot. He's a genetic outlier, and he's also in classic physique. He's at his weight cap. Where is he going to go? He doesn't need more drugs. Same with Chris Bumstead. Right. When he says what his current cycle is, it probably is real because he can't grow anymore. He's as big as he can be.
Right.
So the question people need to ask is not what they're doing now. It's what they did to get there. Right. When these gigantic pros, say they're on 2 grams now, it was 6 grams to get to that point. It's 2 grams to hold that.
Right.
And what I meant before about risk aversion, so people understand, is a lot of the guys, the difference, if you have a lifestyle client, a middle-aged guy, he's on TRT, he might be adverse from going from 140 test to 160. Like, oh my God, something's wrong. Something's going to happen to my cholesterol. You get an amateur bodybuilder and you go from 1 gram to 2 grams and they're very nervous. The bigger pros that tend to use more, they don't care. If it kills them, it will kill them. They do what it takes to win. And that's kind of the difference. It's a shocking attitude when you first see it, but unfortunately it's their job and it's what they do and it's what they're good at. And it's no different than, like you said, an MMA fighter getting in the ring. It's no different than a race car driver getting behind the wheel. There's some risk associated with any high level sport. So, football players break their necks.
It's so funny because people scoff at that. They scoff at having to use drugs to compete at a high level. And for one, it comes down to the question of like, what is the purpose of life? And I truly believe it's just enjoying the passage of time, is, you know, whatever that means for you. If it means getting fucking huge and running a ton of anabolics, it means getting huge and running a ton of anabolics. And for that person, even though it might shorten the length of their time, they're still enjoying it. And that's truly, at the end of the day, all that fucking matters. You know, I get on my motorcycle every day, drive to the fucking gym. I drive, you know, a crotch rocket or a sports bike. And it's in Thailand, it's fucking crazy dangerous. Like, it's stupid fucking dangerous. People die on a daily basis in just a small town every day on bikes. But it's fun. I fucking love it. And, you know, call me stupid. People don't scoff at that nearly as much, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not, and I wasn't judging any of the bodybuilders. I just was trying to, you know, show what it's going to take. Like, if you're a, you know, a 19-year-old kid and this is the road you want to go down, that's really what will occur at a certain point. Not to say that, you know, if you're a freak, like that kid you were just talking about that won his pro card at 19, he might not need that amount to get big, depending on where he wants to go. If he wants to stay in classic, he probably won't need that amount of stuff. If he wants to go to open, he most likely will.
Yeah.
You know, I think
it's when people kind of, it's so funny because it's when people sort of take that threshold off. I had a guy who was concerned about using growth hormone due to cancer. And it's like, listen, man, it's, unless you have pre-existing cancers that are active and growing, I don't think it's that much of a concern to be worried about. It could be in the future as you age, as you get older, and it becomes more of a relevant conversation. But right now, look, the biggest change I see in people is when they go from 2 IUs a day to 10 IUs a day. It hands down, like, that is when people transform their fucking physiques. And yes, there's risks involved, but it's, you know, yeah. I mean, investors make bigger risks than you're doing right now every single day with millions of dollars, and, you know.
Yeah, and that was the other one too. Like, again, with the growth hormone, like the big guys, very rarely do you see guys using 2 IUs. I see guys using 4 to 6 sometimes when they diet, depending. Depends on the guy, right? Some guys hold more water from it. So maybe going into a high level pro show, they might not be running a lot. Maybe they won't be running any. I would say in the off season, most of these guys are running 10 at least. You know, you and I both firsthand know guys that run 30. Under three full bottles a day. So it's not unheard of. Is that common? I don't think so much in the United States. I think the European bodybuilding scene guys are a little more liberal with their usage, right? They've a lot less fear. Like, same with strongmen stuff. Like, the European strongmen guys do not care. They'll eat Halo like candy, and the American guys tend to be a little more reserved with their use. I think it's in bodybuilding.
A lot of the strongman guys, I'm very fortunate to coach a few, and they are, I mean, they're also fucking crazy, I'll be honest. But
but yeah, I mean, I agree. So I think it's, you know, 250, 300-ish. And then it increases as it's needed, and it just goes and goes and goes.
Goes and goes and goes.
I don't know if
until you have the desired effects. It's just more is required. It's the same concept with anything, this whole thing of balance, and you need to be careful with life. Yes, you know, if you have a family and if you have things that you need to consider, there's alternatives to your reality. But if you're looking to be the best ever, there is no balance in whatever you do. If it's being a fucking painter, if it's being the best chess player, if it's, you know, being the best streamer online, like, there is no balance, and every day becomes a moving task that you have to solve. And if that task requires, okay, I need to increase the dose because when I was doing 10 IUs versus 8, I looked significantly fuller, and I noticed my, you know, PBs in the gym were going up. Okay, that's what you need. That's part of doing more. Let's go for it, you know.
Yeah. And with that, again, and I don't want it to seem like it's the drugs that's truly just driving this, right? The drugs are clearly a big part of this, but I will say firsthand that the discipline and the dedication that these guys have to this sport and this lifestyle is unlike anything else. There are very few humans I've ever met that are as disciplined as pro bodybuilders when it comes to their food and their training and their sleep and every other metric. You can ask them any question, they will tell exactly how much water they drink, how many hours of sleep they get a night, what time they go to bed. It is the same, right? You only see I see the variations in the lifestyle guys, the guys that can't fall asleep. They, you know, everything is like, there's too many variables in their life. These guys, everything is controlled for.
I have a client named Andrew, and he is absolutely the shit. He's a flight paramedic, so he's in fixed wings in, like, you know, the mountainous areas. I'm not going to get too specific here, but he doesn't miss, man. He doesn't fucking miss. And this dude's working 24 hours. Doesn't fucking miss. He's in a plane, in the air, eating his fucking meals. Does not miss. Sleeps immaculately every night. Like, doesn't miss a fucking liter of water. Doesn't miss a gram of salt. Doesn't miss. And he's put on literally almost 40 pounds at this point within the past 6 months. And it's just like, yeah, you know, like, dude hasn't missed an injection, hasn't missed a workout, hasn't missed a meal, hasn't missed, you know, it's just that kind of shit stacks up in your favor so much. And I think it's a huge comparison, right? Yes, the gear matters, and I think it even supersedes training, but you need to get food in at a very, very comprehensive level, and you need to get your lifestyle in check. And what I mean by that is sleep, water, stress management, like those things too. That shit matters, and it stacks in your favor if you can rack up day after day after day after day consecutively of positive trends.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right. From the time you wake up to the time you go to bed.
Yeah.
So cool. We could probably leave that there. I think that's enough for people to think about their future in bodybuilding and where it goes. We could always do another, you know, you and I had planned to do another video to tag onto our blood work stuff to go more into cholesterol management and stuff, which we could do next time. That's going to be a longer video.
That's a good idea.
We could also do some deep dives possibly on more in-depth cycles and some of the reasoning behind some of this stuff too, because there's definitely like there is generally a thought process in cycle design, whether people believe it or not. Like, you know, we could do that in a different video though.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Kolton. I'll put your all your stuff down below. Please reach out to Kolton if you are looking for a fantastic coach.
Appreciate it.
You know, take care, brother. I will see you soon.
Yeah. See you, man.